Innovation is in our veins. Soon the whole world will know our names. Sharing our knowledge and freedom reign. We here for the people, you know it's our way. Setting foundations is part of the dream. It doesn't matter if you're new to the game. Listen up now, cause we all gon' say, elevate, 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 higher, elevate, 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 higher. We gon' rise up, we all gon' shine. Work through adversity, stay on the grind. Elevate, elevate, this is our time. Elevate, elevate.
Welcome to the Elevate Podcast, everyone. It's so great to have you all on one more time. It's your boy Josh,
Reg,
and we're grateful to be back on with you yet again. Sorry it's a day late. As I said, you can blame me for that one. Your boy's not been taking care of himself.
Well, you got your tea now, so you're good to go.
Yeah, I was OP today, dog. So I woke up today. I'm like, am I gonna call in sick or not? I can't afford to call in sick right now. We're in the midst of some huge projects at the moment at work, and I was like, I gotta figure it out. I can't talk. I couldn't take any meetings today, and I was saving my voice for you guys for this moment right here, and I was trying to figure out what is the secret ingredient to try and get my voice back, and that peppermint tea just all of a sudden cured it all. It's beautiful, dog.
The miraculous peppermint tea. I'm not gonna lie, I have a good stash of it in our cupboard too for the same reason. Dude, but it works.
It does the trick, man. I was surprised. Everyone's talked about it. I've had it before. Didn't really sense a difference, but this time it was just what the doctor ordered.
Came in clutch for you. I'm going to say the only thing second to, or peppermint tea's only second to St. Lucian allergy medication, because they have some extra stuff in there that you can't get in North America. So
classic.
Yeah. So it's a cure all. So second, like I said, peppermint tea is only second to that.
Fair play. Wow. The more you know. Well, today we got a lot of stuff to get into today. First off is these wildfires. We're kind of the aftermath of these wildfires. What's happening? And so they're looking into arson for a lot of these fires. Quebec's doing their own investigation. There's been word coming out in Nova Scotia. Alberta, Danielle Smith in Alberta is putting in an investigation because I think they said upwards of 175 of the wildfires, they have no idea how they started. And so they're kind of looking into arson for those. And then you had like the thematic map of Quebec and all the fires starting at the same time, and everyone being like, it was an organized coup on our country, and just a lot of stuff going on. So there's a lot of ideas floating around of like what happened to these wildfires, why they all erupt at the same time in multiple provinces and multiple locations, and so everyone's kind of looking for a finger to point at. Partly why people are now thinking government conspiracy is because the Liberals did not waste any time claiming climate change for the sake of trying to increase carbon tax and increase taxing people over the case of these wildfires.
Well, the worst part is there's so much to be said about with climate change and these fires, and then also just the fact that when you look at the video and they're like, oh my God, all these fires are starting at once, and it's like, no, they might only be visible at once because it was the same day that we had plus 33 temperatures. So that just added fuel to fires that may have started a couple days apart, but then really were boosted enough that they could be picked up by satellite on the one day. But there's the firefighters that we've spoken to and that they've interviewed in different news media outlets have all said, these fires aren't being started by natural causes. The climate is definitely warmed up and we did not get enough rain. So it's perfect for fires to start. But the thing is, it's human stupidity that's causing a lot of these fires. And so I just had to laugh because there were so many people that I seen on Instagram that were just like, they all started at the same time. This is government conspiracy. And you're right. The Liberal government was just like, ooh, wildfires. We can push our carbon tax. And this is very opportune for us. So I'm thinking it's a case of two things happening at the same time, and one being opportunistic of a tragedy rather than somebody organizing fires to all start at the same time. And I was like, do you realize how much work that would be? And yeah.
And they're all they're miles and miles apart as well at the same time in the middle of nowhere, and then obviously people were kind of bringing to fruition, obviously the helicopter that was dropping napalm on trees. And it's like, well, helicopters are starting fires, and thus, when you talk to anyone who fights fires, that's actually a known strategy is you want to create a burn line so they can't jump that line and continue to burn the rest of the forest down. So, Yeah, there was, as we talked about before in other episodes, people have undergone a lot of trauma from this government, and they are very quick to jump to, they must be doing something to us again. And sometimes we kind of lose our common sense and lose what's actually going on, and really trying to critically think what's happening and looking into them. It's important to look into these things just to make sure, it could be possible that, there was a bunch of, green activists who wanted to prove a point and they all started fires at the same time. Could have happened. Is it likely? Probably not. But these are some things to look into and think critically for yourself.
And I think it's so important, like what you said about like just the trauma that people are going through with like everything this government has done and is doing currently and the shady things that have happened. Like it's not beyond the realm of possibility that like, oh, something nefarious happened. But it's again, that likelihood. It's like, what is most likely the case? And it is most likely the case that human beings either camping or burning garbage, or because I know that
cigarette butts.
Yeah, cigarette butts is another one. But I know that they kind of nailed down the Tintalin fire that was near me to this lady burning garbage in her backyard on the hottest day that we had so far this year. And I guess she was known in the area for that. That was her thing. She didn't want to put out the cardboard, and then was burning brush at the same time. And then it just caught the entire neighborhood on fire. And so people can, like I said, people can say climate change in the sense that like, yeah, we didn't get any rain, which is weird. And then it was also super hot, super early, weird. And it's just, if you look at climate charts, like we've just been getting warmer and warmer and warmer over the decades, and less snow in the wintertime. So yeah, things that you could normally burn at this time of year, you can't do anymore. But to like, then to say like the government did this, it's like, no, like I think that's too far. And the problem with that is that if you go on that narrative, it like actually makes you look like this crazy conspiracy theorist. And so then it degrades the value of all the actual crap that's going on. Because if you put that in line with the actual things that are going on, like the CDC, this decentralized currency, centralized, thank you. Mm-hmm. Or the Bill C-11 or the carbon tax, or the list goes on. Like if you're adding that to it, then it actually degrades the argument for these very legitimate things that are happening that are nefarious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think the thing to people should keep in mind too, where the whole them turning, and by them, I would say at this point, people on the left, when they changed the idea of global warming to climate change, I've always had an issue with the term climate change in general, because it's so vague. It's broad enough that you can cover a wide range of issues. So I agree that we're experiencing climate change, some type of climate change. I don't know what it is, but like something's going on. And what I find with this, the stuff that we're dealing with in our generation, I think this will open up an interesting conversation, I think, between the two of us. Mm-hmm. Is it's opening up the idea that, it started with the Greco-Roman Empire of kind of putting the individual at the center of their own world. And the fact that we as people think that we have the power to change the weather is wild to me. And the fact we're letting our governments tax us and take our money because they said they're going to help change our weather is really an interesting idea to me. And I have an issue with, but
yeah, I think the way that people look at it, the reason why scientists are like that I've encountered in my master's, like the things that I've read, the reason why they are attributing this to us is because when you look at the emergence of human beings, and then you look at the Industrial Revolution, and then you just start to see how we've impacted our climate and how we've changed environments. Like we do have the power to really change environments, which is incredibly cool, and then can be dangerous if not used or done well. So I do see where we have the power to impact the environment. Do I think a carbon tax is going to fix that? Hell no. not even a little bit. But yeah, and then to find out, if you read into some of the carbon tax stuff that they've done, they're doing a carbon tax, and then like I talked about last week about cap and trade being the worst of the worst, they're doing the carbon tax plus cap and trade. I was like, oh, amazing, perfect.
Totally. Yeah, I think there is 100% better. Like, I don't know, like this is where I struggle, right? Because I really do believe there's a more sustainable way to live than we currently are living. I think there's a better way to take care of our world, better way to take care of our planet. Do not get me wrong. But I feel like we've allowed ourselves to kind of put that mantra or put that mission in the hands of people who really don't have the Earth's best interest at heart, and they're using it as a point of power rather than using it as a point to actually help the world.
Well, that's what it's exactly that. Like when we were talking about like earlier with the wildfire, like Justin Trudeau getting out there and being like, and this is why the carbon tax is necessary. That's not helpful. Like that is not helpful in the slightest. And especially because like carbon taxes are not a good way to do it. I think the federal, I'm trying to remember the name of that department that actually releases those documents. I think it's a federal or parliamentary budget officer or budget office. I can't remember the name of the thing. I'll find it and then send it so we can include it in the show notes. But basically, it's this department of government that puts out reports on a weekly basis. And they've said to the effect that the carbon tax that they're putting on is going to indirectly harm Canadians who are the most vulnerable. Those are people who have the lowest economic status in the country. It's going to indirectly harm them. And the biggest producer or polluters, which are the upper class, are going to be coming out of this unscathed. So it's just like, great. Let's just make the poorer people poorer and pretend like we're doing something meaningful. And that's what I have a problem with.
Yeah, especially especially coming on the heels of our the latest rate hike as well by the Bank of Canada, 0.25. Yeah. And the fact that rumor is by the next rate hike, they're looking at another 0.75.
I know. I saw that. And I was just like, they do that, they're going to hurt people bad. And they keep saying, they're like, well, consumerism is still going strong. People are still buying clothing and still buying, things. And so I have a couple theories on like why people are doing that, but it's just, I don't know. It's interesting to see, but I also wonder how much of that is just necessities that they're attributing to spending.
Yeah, let's break it down a little bit. They're saying like they said that our GDP increased by 3%. Mm-hmm. Obviously that is like that also includes government spending. So that's not just like us doing like commerce amongst each other. That's also kind of money kind of leaving the country and coming back. So where do like we really have to break down the type of spending. So you have like kind of like you have spending where you can kind of, as you said, you're buying clothing, you're buying shoes. Then you have the spending that's for yourself, or sorry, for living. So your shelter, your food, your electricity, that type of thing. I'm curious of like what the categorization really is between like, is it just the GDP's gone up because inflation's increased so much that people are still spending money on their core needs and that's just increased a lot? Or is it really people still have enough money left over and that they're still like buying stupid crap?
Well, yeah, and you have to think about the fact that so much of our GDP is made up by the housing market. And so like people are still buying houses. People still need places to live. I mean, you think about how many houses we lost just in the fires alone. Like those people are now going to have to find new houses to buy. So I know that they were specifically citing disposable income is what they were saying that was the reason why they are on the warpath again to raise rates. And I'm like you, where I'm curious as to what breakdown are they using for disposable income? Like what are they counting when they look at that?
Internet.
Yeah, right. I mean, you could count that, or subscriptions to different platforms and services.
Disney Plus, anybody?
Yeah, the Disney Plus. But like, I'm just wondering, like, if you think about things like if you need Photoshop software, that's all subscription now to Adobe. Would that count then in your disposable, even though you're using that for your work? Like, how far are they actually, looking at these things and actually delineating them out? And it would be interesting to see what formula they use. And I looked, I couldn't find anything to actually give a direct breakdown of how they were calculating that. But yeah, it's interesting to look at for sure.
I'm curious what's going through Tiff Macklem's head. Essentially, he runs the head of the Bank of Canada. And because essentially Pierre Poilievre has made no bones about it, that if he gets power, Tiff is the first one he's turfing. Like, he's gone. So I'm curious if, like, Tiff's kind of the point where it's like, you know what, just increase the heck out of it just because we can. So I can at least say I tried. Because he's at a point he probably knows his days are numbered. So is he actually doing his best? Or is he just, trying to lay some hurt as he's on his way out? I'd be curious.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a fun narrative, but like, I think I've read a couple things from him where he's just said, like, I think there's frustration actually between him and the government, like where he's said multiple times that, like, if government keeps spending, we're going to have to keep raising rates. And then I don't know if anybody caught this, but Trudeau and I'm trying to remember the president of Ukraine,
Zelensky.
Zelensky, thank you. And Zelensky and Trudeau got it up in front of everybody in a press conference, and Trudeau was like, we're going to see this through no matter how long it takes, how much it costs. Canada's there. We're doing this. And I was like, oh my God. Like, no. Like, I feel for I really do. I feel for the people of Ukraine. I feel for the people who are, like, currently living in a war-torn country right now. Like, we saw how devastating wildfires were. This is that on steroids. So I do understand, like, how awful that is. But at the same time, if we start putting our population on the streets because we're trying to, fund a war, like, God, no, absolutely not. I keep coming back to the same phrase of, like, get your own house in order before you, invite guests, or before you even go to somebody else's house. Like, it's bad policy.
Yeah, I remember I was watching the global news coverage of that one, where, they did a whole, it was like a 15-minute segment they did of him going over to Ukraine, doing the announcement. It was hard to listen to, him get in front of all those reporters, being like, saying just what you said. And him not care what it's affecting people at home, how it's, causing everyone to suffer. Like, you can only help so much if you have something to give. We have nothing to give. We're just making money out of thin air at this point, which isn't helping anybody. It's making things far worse. And so it's really easy. I know, like, the increase in government spending continues to add to that GDP as well. I'm not saying it's the full 3%, but it's some of it. It's not helpful. And so I've discovered this over the past. It's a theme I've seen, say, over the last 10 years. People tend to exemplify or take after whoever their leader is. I found with the population in general, 10 years ago under a Harper government, people were a little more fiscally conservative with their funds. And we're a lot more, like, heavy on saving. Whereas now we have, like, the biggest debt to GDP ratio. Our debt increases our GDP from individuals in this country for I don't even know when the last time that happened was. So, when they see their leader just kind of throwing around money, people tend to do the same in some ways. In other cases, people are forced to do that because of the circumstances that have been created, forcing people to have to really borrow to maybe feed their family, to borrow to be able to pay for their shelter, or borrow to pay for their electric bill. Like, people are in dire straits, and we just keep throwing money out of this country like it's going out of business.
Mm-hmm. And don't crucify me, but this is my own own thought, like, psychologically. I wonder how much people are looking, and they're stressed, and they're like, the climate is burning down. Housing prices are ridiculous. I'm never going to get a house. And there's just so much despair that people are buying things to make themselves feel better. And I wonder, like, because I know in psychology they talk about, using things as a crutch to kind of not deal with the trauma that you're feeling. And we went through some traumatic years, with COVID, and now with we had a mass shooting in this province specifically. Like, there's BLM protests. There's so much crap that happened within a short span of time. and how many people were burnt out by it all and just tired. And I wonder if like a lot of this spending now that we're seeing is just people like, you know what? I went through that crap. I deserve this X number YZ thing. Or people being like, you know what? I'm never going to afford a house, so why not just live it up now? Like, I think there's a little bit of that happening. And like I said, I think that's my own assumption. Has not been tested or proven, but I get that sense when I talk to people that that everybody knows it's hard and that hard is coming. And so instead of kind of like doing that preparation, they're just like, you know what? Screw it. The world can burn down around me. I'll deal with it. That's future me problem. And right now it's just going to be like, I'm just going to live my life and do what I want right now because I just suffered a whole bunch. So I'm going to enjoy it now. And so I wonder if there's a little bit of that happening. But at the same time, again, it's just the cost of everything is so expensive. So you could be like that person who bought a t-shirt, 3 years ago, it was only $15. Now it's $45. And they'd be like, people are spending more on clothing. It's like, well, yeah, because clothing costs more. So I wonder how much of that is playing into it too. Yeah,
that's an interesting theory. I never thought of it like that before. But that is the society we live in. That is one of our vices in the West in general is we're very materialistic and we look to material things to make us feel better. So possible. Don't know. But it's an interesting idea. And I've been seeing some posts come up on Twitter lately of people feeling the crunch of these rate hikes. Mm-hmm. There was a guy who listed a bunch of houses that went up for sale in Ontario and they were bought back in 2020 and how much they're reselling for. And there was a couple houses I saw that were sold for 1.4, 1.5 and then went back on the market 3 years later because they couldn't afford the mortgage payments on them for like $930.
Wow.
Yeah, dude. I was like, that's a significant drop. And that I think that you see those increase in rates, it's going to happen more and more as we move going forward. When people have to renew their mortgage rates.
You think about it, you've just erased $400,000 worth of value. Like that's nuts, right? I mean, those homes should never have been, valued at that price anyway. But I mean, like I said, where our GDP is mostly comprised of the housing market, I mean, it looks good for GDP if houses are ridiculously priced. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see when this whole correction like eventually comes. But yeah, I don't know if it's going to hit us here in Halifax as hard, especially like I said, where our level of housing stock was so scarce to begin with. And now we have to add another 150 new homes to that, mix because we erased them with a fire. So I shouldn't say we erased them. They were erased with a fire. So now that's 150 homes that we now have to replace in an already scarce environment. So I don't know if we'll see that, but yeah, places like Ontario where they're keeping up with the housing supply and now those variable mortgages are coming back, like be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, that's the problem with being in Canada in general that man. Okay, so I was talking to someone from the bank, and there's a lot of positives. There's positives to like how highly regulated banks are in our country, and there's a lot of negatives to it. One of the positives is like we're able to regulate to a point where we tend to not be totally affected by big global financial events, mm-hmm. as long as those who are in power are maintaining the checks and balances. But the issue that we're running into is, and this is the one thing I hate about, I don't know how we get away. I mean, the government's about the banks, so I get it. But the fact that you can't lock in a 30-year rate here is crazy to me. I hate that you can't do that.
I know that's something you can do in the States. Is that something you can do in like other countries, like Commonwealth countries like Europe or in Australia or New Zealand?
I'd be curious.
Yeah, because I know that I recently saw TikTok and it was this guy talking about how ridiculous the housing market was and how like houses have never been more unaffordable. And I was thinking that this guy was probably from Canada and his TikTok was from Australia. And I was like, that's interesting that they're having the same kind of housing crisis that we're having here. And I'm like, why is it that they're also having a housing crisis at the same time we're having a housing crisis? Like, you know, I'm just wondering what the similarities are that they're having the same thing happen.
So from what I can see here, they just recently started offering the option of like a 30-year fixed, but like they've been like us for a long time, so makes sense. So, and like I don't know, I look at places like Russia, and like it's impossible to purchase there. Mm-hmm. Like you have to have something along the lines of like 75% down to be able to purchase a home. That's crazy.
Oh my god!
And so, when essentially, you know, the fall of the Soviet Union happened, and you know everything got bought up by all of the wealthy in Russia, just led to people just never being able to be able to own a home, which was news to me. When I went to go visit there, I was talking to people there. And to tell them telling me that like people owning their own homes is just not a thing. Like that doesn't really happen here unless like you're fortunate, which just didn't register with me at the time. Mm-hmm. But like seeing what's happened in our country, and I'm starting to see the development of how that can happen. You own nothing to be happy, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. And it's interesting because like I know I have relatives in England, and they were saying the same thing, that like housing is passed down, like mortgages are passed down over generations, just because like that's the only way they can do it, because the houses are so expensive. And I was just like, that seems wild to me that you would pass down a mortgage to a child, being like, you can maybe pay off this mortgage that I started, you know, but that's just
Isn't that crazy.
It's nuts, right? So that's one thing where I'm like, okay, I am grateful that we're in Canada for that, but we just need to get some proper leadership.
True. I mean, I guess like within that same breath, back to government spending. So, by Pierre's tweet here, Polyev puts out, the Trudeau Singh coalition is about to dump $60 billion of new inflationary spending into the economy. Help me fight for balanced budgets to lower inflation interest rates. So they're proposing another budget, and another amount of spending, and it's just another lump sum of cash that the conservatives are blocking within Parliament at the moment. And obviously Trudeau's using all the things he can do at his disposal to paint Pierre a certain way, to make him look like he's a bad person for not allowing the spending to go through. But
it's like, he's not passing my budget because he just wants, you know, this to be defeated so he can get elected, and it's completely painted as like a power move. You know what? Like on some level, it probably is. Mm-hmm. Like I think that probably it would be in his interest to have an election right now, because people are like, they're PO'd, and like a lot of people that I know that have never voted Conservative federally before, like myself included, are now going to vote Conservative in the federal election because we have no other opportunity or no other choice. And so, yeah, I think that it is opportune for him to, you know, have a non-confidence vote because the budget wouldn't pass. In the same breath, though, he must be looking at this like, what the hell is this government doing? Like, you can tell he's mad, like watching him speak when he was talking about the carbon tax, and he's like, we can't do anything about the carbon tax right now. He's like, but when elected, he's like, that's the first thing to go. So it's interesting for sure.
Yeah, I'm
here with our comments.
Was there something from this clip that you wanted to pull out?
No, it was just kind of...
or just him talking about delaying the federal budget?
Just him delaying the federal budget. I guess the big point that I wanted to pull out there was just him talking about him saying exactly what I just said. Like, the first thing to go is a carbon tax. He's like, because it doesn't make sense. Even the parliamentary officials have said that it doesn't make sense. So, I mean, if they're saying it from Parliament that it doesn't make sense, then why the hell are we doing it?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, it's like it's so obvious at the point that it's completely self-interested. You know, that's why we're doing it. You know, it's not to serve anybody, any of his constituents. It's completely to serve those who are above him in a kind of the globalist initiative, I would say. It's just, you know, we're giving essentially a lot of this money that we are making off the carbon tax is going to fund different weapon initiatives and stuff like that, right? So whatever they can do to nickel and dime us, they'll make it happen.
I just think I don't even know if I believe that it's that, or if I believe that it's just more performative action. Like, I just think that's the classic hallmark of this government, is just like the, oil pipeline that they bought, the Parliament was like, do not buy this. It's not in our interest. We'll never make the money back on this. He went and spent the money. Now this carbon tax, and being like, don't do this. This is going to like indirectly hurt our most vulnerable population. They're pushing it through anyway. And so it's just like this kind of performative action that is a hallmark of this government that just annoys the crap out of me.
Yeah. You were talking about performative action earlier, in kind of relation to food insecurity. What do you see going on there? What's happening?
So as I've kind of said like a couple times on this show, basically that I work in the nonprofit and charitable sector in Nova Scotia. So my purview is all of the charities and nonprofits that are working in food security right now. So that's like food banks, that's provincially funded food banks and delivery services, because there's some really cool organizations that are actually doing like home delivery to different people who, like seniors who can't get out to a food bank. They're like, no, you're gonna be covered, which is really cool, but also really devastating when you look at the fact that we need that. And so what this government has done is that they are going to pour money into the food banks and into the charitable sector that is actually distributing food, because the charitable sector is saying, we are completely tapped out. Like, we cannot keep food on the shelves. We cannot keep feeding people this way. Like, there is an obvious problem. We have not seen this rise in use ever. Like, it's completely dwarfing all other metrics that we've ever had. Something is very wrong here. And so the government said, that's okay. We're going to release all this new funding just for you guys. And the food banks are like, cool, that's not the solution though. They're like, we don't want to exist. And that's the really cool thing about a lot of these organizations that are working in like social services of the charitable sectors. Their whole mandate is to not exist anymore. They're like, once we've fixed a problem, which in reality, like, you're never going to fully fix a problem, but if you can make it better to a point where you can cut down the amount of food banks that you need, or you can lay off staff so that you're not staffing it as much, that's a sign that a community is doing well. And so they've said that. So all of these organizations across the internet actually are like posting this, saying, this is ridiculous. Like, cool for the money, but this is not a solution. And the government is running around like, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, that he has given this money to food banks and he's feeding Canadians. And it's like, no, we don't need more dependent people. We need to like build people's own independence to be able to feed themselves.
Mm-hmm. So this goes into, people, conservatives when he was first running, the paranoid conservatives. Like, Trudeau gets in, he's going to turn us into a communist society. You think we're starting to go down that path now?
I don't know if I'd say communist society, but we're definitely a more dependent society than we were before he got into power. Just because you've created the conditions to create more homeless, create more food bank usage, create more debt, like unprecedented levels of mental health issues right now. Like, we know that when the stock market does badly, that you have more suicides. It's just it's a weird correlation, but it makes sense. Like, people, they're stressed out and they don't know what to do anymore, and the world seems bleak. And so you have a lot more mental health problems like that, which, like I said, result in more death. So I think that like all these things, not to make it like so crazy, but it's not far off the mark to say like, we are unhealthier, we are more in debt, we are more dependent than we ever were. And it's not a good look.
No, definitely not. And I think a lot of people would say this is kind of a part of a plan to, like, if you make more people dependent on the system, the easier it is to control them and kind of do whatever you want. There's going to be, if, for example, especially as we get into the digital age, if you speak out against the government, they can kind of take away certain benefits you have that aren't, helpful, and messaging towards the government that's not helpful. They can kind of keep things quiet. it seems like that's kind of the direction we're going in at this point is the food bank usage is off the charts, and them putting more money into food banks, not surprising. I really Trudeau's not a smart guy, but I get at least there's got to be somebody around him that knows that if you do this, you're going to increase food bank usage. There's a better solution. Like there has to be someone saying that around him. And Trudeau's like, I don't want that solution. I want us to continue down this path of trying to get more people on the system.
Yeah, I don't know. But I like what you said there about there has to be somebody raising a voice saying this isn't the right way. And I think that if I had a chance to sit down with a politician, like a federal minister, one of the things I would ask first is I would say, do you believe that diversity is our strength? And what minister isn't going to say yes? It's like, okay, you say that you believe that. How many times have you disagreed openly with the prime minister and voiced that disagreement? And I think it'd be interesting to see their response. I would say that they might give the political answer, be like, oh, we have discussions and blah, blah, blah. But you know what, when push comes to shove, they're not disagreeing. Nobody in the party is voting against a bill that the party is putting forward.
And if they do, they're getting tossed out of the party. That's the problem, right? We've seen, I think 5, 6, 7 different MPs over the course of this government have come out against them, and they've been tossed immediately.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? Is you don't speak against the grand poobah.
True, you're right. Yeah, it's so. Yeah, what's I'm curious how many people are pulling from EI right now.
This is one of those things where I was like, man, that was great when we had Philip to just pull these stats up.
Yeah, exactly.
Shout out to Philip.
Seriously. Yeah. I don't think we're going to get a recent stat on it. But yeah, I really am curious of what is that number right now of people pulling from EI? Is the number increasing? The number of people collecting regular EI benefits fell by 26.7% in the 12 months to March 2023. So that's what Stats Canada is saying. Let's read that paragraph again. Let's make sure we got all the context here. In March, 388,000 Canadians received regular employment insurance benefits, little change from February. The number of regular EI recipients in March 2023 was the lowest on record outside of the period when the Canadian Emergency Benefit was in place from March to September 2020. The number of people collecting regular EI benefits fell by 26.7% in the 12 months of 2023. So that's March 2022 to March 2023. That's interesting. I'm curious if it's more of is it similar to the Biden stat of I've added so many jobs to the economy since I've been president because so much was lost before he got in. Is it one of those scenarios where it was so high at one point, and of course it's going to start kind of coming down little by little, but it's still in kind of relation to everything else and other points in time it's still really high? I'd be curious.
Yeah, and I also wonder because I know that when they talk about participation rates and they talk about people who are seeking employment, a lot of times they will exclude people who I think it's over a year have gone without a job because they deem them as no longer seeking employment. So they're not even counted in the ratio anymore. So that was something interesting that I found out through my economics class. I was like, oh, well, that's inaccurate. And the prof was just like, yeah, we know, but it looks better, right? And so
you're taken out of the pool of data after 1 year of having no job.
To my understanding, yeah, it's if you don't have the job and you haven't, secured a job within a year, that you are now no longer looking. And so it might even be a year after you finish your EI benefits, if you are eligible for them. So I'll go back and look that up and bring that to next week. But yeah, it's one of those things where participation is not including a good portion of the population that they've deemed as not actively looking.
Interesting. So I mean, this is likely not the case, but it would be funny if it was the 26 that dropped. There's people that still haven't found work, but they're just kind of pulled out of the survey pool.
Well, you can make statistics say whatever you want them to say, depending on who's an outlier and how you group things. Yeah, it's interesting to look at the people collecting regular EI benefits. I would like to see, like, has there been any changes to EI eligibility? Has there been any changes to EI compensation amounts? Like, what has changed in that period aside from labor force participation? Because I think that it's the other factors that are being left out that might tell an interesting story.
I agree, 100%. So before we end off, I want you to kind of jump into cap and trade.
Oh, man.
Give us the specifics cap and trade are, why this is a bad thing, and then why it's bad, especially when it's compounded with a carbon tax.
Okay, so with cap and trade, what they basically do is they say, okay, we know that these producers are producing this much pollution. So we know that we have a certain ceiling of pollution. And the idea is that you lower that ceiling year over year in a theoretical perfect world. But what they do is they have offsets too. So if you say buy a forest that then offsets the amount of pollution, you can get credits for that, because you can say, okay, I normally produce, let's say, 100,000 tons of CO2. But this year I produced 130,000 units of CO2, but I bought a forest that cleans the air and is equivalent to 50,000 units of CO2. It's like, okay, cool. So now I have, 100? I said 100,000 to 120,000. Mm-hmm. So you now have 30,000 units worth of room that you can now trade to another company and get money for that, because that other company that's overproducing says we need room, and so they buy that. So the idea is, it's the cap is the amount that you're currently producing. So if you offset that, any amount that you offset that by, you can now trade to somebody else. So the same amount of pollution could be produced, or more could be produced. It's now you're just trading around the credits for that pollution. And the best part is that it like values high polluters, because if you own an oil refinery like the Irving Oil Refinery in New Brunswick, and you produce so much pollution, they know that, and then they say, you're a major polluter, here's your major polluter credits. And then if they do any amount of little things, they're credited for that. So it's just a bad way to do that. And then to throw a carbon tax on top of that, because what happens is that the producers are also paying carbon tax on their production. And so they pass that amount on to the consumer. The consumer then pays it as well. Then it all gets taxed on top of that. So they're freaking out in New Brunswick right now, because they're looking at the price of their gas going, oh my God, we're going to get nailed a crap ton of times. And then we're going to have provincial tax on top of that.
Triple carbon.
Well, what it is, it's like, because you know that the businesses, they're not going to take responsibility for that extra cost that they're going to incur. They're just going to pass it on to the consumer and then cite increased operating costs. And the UARB in that province is going to, agree with them, say, oh, we can't, disadvantage shareholders for your company. So we can't put you in the down and out. So it's fair for you to increase your prices. And then it just exponentially increases the price to the end user, which is us.
Yep. So what I heard, what I understand is it's just going to be the same system, just looking different. And it's just another system that is actually going to screw over people even more than it already has.
It's just going to keep getting more and more expensive. And so it was funny, because I was talking about this with a coworker, and she was like, well, you just are a ray of sunshine today. And I'm like, it's hard, because I consider myself to be an optimist and a very happy-go-lucky person. But you see some of these things and you're like, oh my good Lord. Like, what? what are we going to deal with in the next year or two? And like I said, working in the charitable sector and knowing how hard people are working to try and care for each other, it's going to just make their jobs and lives harder. And so it's hard on the people who are less fortunate. It's hard on the people trying to help them. And it's not good.
Yeah, I agree. It's I think the great barometer for you as a leader is that if you're working for your constituents is, can you walk through a mall? And we'll make it super easy for Trudeau. Could he even walk through the Rideau Mall in Ottawa next to Parliament without being chastised? I'd be curious.
I'd say just walk through the parking lot. How many people are you going to see sleeping under the what are they called? The parkades. How many people are going to be there begging for money? Mm-hmm. I think before you even step into the mall, I think who's on the streets right before it.
Gee.
And so that's what I think about. But I'm trying to think of like a positive spin to end this all on, because I'm just like, we can't leave it there. That's too depressing.
Okay. So I'll show you something. This cracked me up a lot. So last night, Denver Nuggets won the NBA Finals, and Nikola Jokic, who is their big all-star for the Denver Nuggets, great player, one of the all-time best 5 players, center of all time is what they're saying. And he is from Serbia. And this man literally just won the championship at the highest level you possibly could have. And this dude gets interviewed after the game, and the reporter was asking him, so, you know, you said when you beat LeBron and Lakers in the first round, you said you didn't feel anything. I'm wondering now what you're feeling after you've won the championship. And this is what he said, dude.
And if you're looking forward to a parade coming up in Denver.
When is parade? When is parade?
Thursday.
No. I need to go home. Okay.
This man just won the championship. He's worried about, I need to go home, man. I'm not going to no parade.
Yeah. No, he's just like, he's got his priorities set. He's like, no, we got to relax. It's been a stressful time.
It was funny watching him after they won. He's just dapping up all these guys. He has no emotion on his face. I'm like, you literally just won the championship. And he literally looked like he could care less. Literally couldn't care less. It was so funny to watch. I was like, you know what? I respect it. He loves his family. He loves playing basketball, but nothing's bigger than just his family and just want to go home. So
yeah. Well, they don't make them like they do back in the old country.
Yeah,
you know?
real talk. Yeah, he's a beast. Awesome. All right, so we'll leave it at there. But whatever it is you're doing, whether you be trying to cap and trade,
just trying to go home to your family,
or just trying to live the dream, baby. Whatever it is you're doing, wherever you are, we love you. We're out. Peace.